Hey everyone.
Do you think that behavior is incompetent, slow, and lazy? What if I told you that they're none of those things?
Shut the fuck up.
Now, you might be thinking that behavior is one of the most incompetent developer teams of all time. Or are they? As we know, they are known for making changes that nobody asked for, creating new bugs repeatedly, and even fixing those bugs and creating more bugs on top of that. Have you ever thought about what game you're playing? And no, I'm not saying like the basics. I'm talking about going deeper. It's all the entity's doing. Let me explain. The entity's purpose is to instill hope and fear into the survivors. But that's what behavior is telling you. That's just a small piece of the lore. What if I told you that it's much more than that? The entity doesn't strike fear in the way that we perceive it to be. Let's be honest, no one's really scared of the killers.
Posers! 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 Posers!
The point was to instill hope and fear into us. Not us, the survivors. Us, the people playing the game. Behavior uses the purpose of the entity to create controversial decisions that many of us, the audience, don't like. But that's the point of the entity. Here's an example. The release of the Resident Evil chapter gave us a lot of hope and excitement for the future. Then when it was released, that hope was turned into pain, with the new map being objectively the worst map in the game. The creation of multiple bugs, and the beginning of the end for console players. And here's an example that's more like a hit on the head. Ever since the grade system took place, there's been multiple issues with the grade reset that happens month after month, and it's the same issue, and they fix it somehow, but then they break it every single month.
September 13th. We've heard reports of some issues with the most recent grade reset and its rewards. The team is aware of the issues and is actively investigating. We'll provide you all with more info soon. November 3rd. We are investigating an issue that caused a grade reset for some players. Thank you for your reports. It is being looked into as a high priority and we'll keep you in the loop with more information as we have it. November 15th. We have been investigating cases of distributed denial of services, DDoS, over the last week. We take these reports extremely seriously. We are actively monitoring the situation internally and with our partners to gather as much information as possible and identify trends.
Do you really think that a team of over 100 developers are making the same mistake over and over again? No. That's the entity. That's the purpose of the entity. This game is extremely meta. Meta perks, meta killers, meta survivors. The best killer is the nurse. That's meta. The best perks, Decisive Strike, Unbreakable, that's meta. The fear is meta. The fear was never at the survivors. The fear was never at us being scared of a killer. The fear was all psychological. It was a psychological fear of the game going downhill, only for our fear to be lifted with a supposed great change. For instance, after the Hellraiser patch not fixing many bugs, we got the patch after that, which was the mid-chapter developer update of September 2021.
It's beautiful!
This was an objectively great patch, with only a few minor changes no one really likes, but besides that, everyone likes it. But there was one change that was very controversial, and is now considered to be one of the worst changes that they made, for the killer side that is. And I think now that I said the killer side, you might be aware of what I'm talking about. Yes, boon totems. Ever since boon perks, the killer side has been much more tedious, and in the combination with the skill-based matchmaking, which was another change that nobody wanted, no survivors nor killer wanted that change. It's making playing killer much more of a chore than it has to be. But that's the thing. Do you really think that behavior would implement a change that nobody asked for? No. Unless they want us to suffer. And why would they want us to suffer? Because that's the entity's plan. To instill hope, fear, and pain into us. You know, it's almost as if the entity and behavior is the same thing. Think about it. How do all the licenses get into Dead by Daylight? Or how do all the killers and survivors get into Dead by Daylight? Through the entity. And how do the licensed killers, how do all the survivors get into Dead by Daylight? Through behavior. They're the same thing. And behavior has been fooling us this whole time, thinking we're an incompetent, lazy, and a neglectful company that doesn't listen to our player feedback at all. But they actually are none of those things. Because since the game has rules and lore, aka the entity, they were able to fool us into thinking that they were this terrible company that never makes the right change. But if you look at the pattern, they always make a great change, and they always add that with a terrible change. Every single time. If you look back, which I already did earlier, Resident Evil, the twins. Look at Hellraiser. Hellraiser was considered one of the best updates until not only they removed the voice lines, but then they added NFTs on top of that. Which nobody wanted to be, like, nobody wanted that unless they're rich, and even them probably didn't want it. Every single time they make a change, it's always a good change stacked with a bad change. And do you want to know why? Do you think they're just incompetent? Do you really think that the developers are just that incompetent? A team of over 100, not just 100, not even lower, over 100 developers are making the same mistake time and time again. No. It's the entity. The entity is doing this to us. They're not that incompetent. It's not the developers, it's the entity. And in reality, the entity was
Pulling the strings.
Always in the shadows from the very beginning.
If we want to stop him, we must find him. We must find
Behavior headquarters.
If you reached the end of the video, put in the comments if you think that behavior and the entity are the same thing, or if you think that behavior is just a shitty company.